Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Red Hour, where twice a week I throw a little chaos into Star Trek by reviewing a random episode. So today's episode is the from the original series, season 2, episode 24, "The Ultimate Computer." And when I went on to Paramount Plus to watch this episode, like it saves your spot. Like, so if you're watching the original series or TNG or any of them, whatever the episode you watched last, it'll show like up next is this episode, blah blah blah. Well, I thought it was kind of interesting that when I went on there, um, it this episode was up next. Like it was already coincidentally, just so happened to be the next episode of the original series. So I guess last time I went on Paramount Plus, I had watched episode 23 of season 2 of the original series. So this episode, whatever episode that is, I don't know. I didn't look it up. But so this is like was already the next episode. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So anyway, in so the episode starts off with the Enterprise is orbiting the space station, and there's a Commodore there called excuse me, Commodore Wesley, and Kirk is like, "What's going on here? There was like an urgent message to meet here, and what's the situation?" And he's like, "Well, I'm gonna be the explanation is about to beam aboard." So he beams aboard, and he's talking about Richard Daystrom. And if you ever heard, ever watched other Trek shows, they often bring up the Daystrom Institute. That's where that comes from. So he's going to bring aboard a computer called M5, and they're gonna have like a war game exercise, and basically majority of the crew is going to be off the ship and on this station, and the Enterprise will be manned by like 20 people. So Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Chekhov, Sulu, um, Scotty, and Uhura, and then a few other people like in engineering and stuff. And so Kirk is like, "Well, what am I gonna do?" And the Commodore says, "Oh, you just sit back and let the machine do all the work." And that's like the teaser. And then they roll the credits and the music. So anyway, Bones doesn't like this idea. I'm gonna put on my reading glasses so I can read. Bones, so I can read my notes. Bones doesn't like this idea, and Spock, they're on the turbo lift on the way to engineering, and Spock makes a joke at Bones' expense, says something like, "If there, it's too bad that the ship's surgeon can't be replaced by a machine," or something like that. So Daystrom is getting M5 like prepared, but then says that Scotty, um, Scotty hasn't gave him permission to do anything, and so Kirk, you know, tells Scotty to give him permission, and then and what it's called is a Multitronic unit, and there's been 4 more prior to this that didn't quite work out. So this is the M5. So, and Kirk is kind of uneasy about this whole thing. You know, he's kind of wondering, men need to have purpose, and stuff like that. And he kind of wonders if it would take over as captain, and then what would he do? And Daystrom's like, well, you would find something else to do with your life, so we're not out here risking our lives, and people would be safe and stuff like that. And Spock is kind of like enamored by it. He's kind of more. He finds it interesting and more on the side of Daystrom, I guess. And he tries to help out, and Daystrom won't let him. He's like, no, I got it. I can do this. And so Kirk and McCoy leave the engine room, and they're in the corridor, walking back to the turbo lift and talking. And Bones, already indicated that he doesn't like this idea and thinks it's should be, he just doesn't like the idea. And he's trying to talk to Kirk about Kirk's kind of wondering if he should be worried about this or not, or he's like, am I being too harsh here, or am I? He asked him, you've seen my psychological, my file. What do you think? And Bones basically says, you're always sorry for the person, you're always sorry for the other person who loses their job to a machine. And you have to think back to, the turn of the century when cars were replacing the horse and buggy, and those people lost their jobs. Or even in the 80s when robots started building cars, and those people lost their jobs, and now we're discussing AI and how that's going to replace some jobs, so it's a long, it's an age-old discussion, since machines have been invented. I mean, it's always been that discussion, and we're gonna have it again, and you're gonna have it, in the future. So M5 changes the course. So they set it up, and M5 changes the course of the ship. So they're already saying, that it can change course without being prompted to by the captain or whatever. And this happens a lot throughout the episode, where they investigate. They go to a planet, and they do a scan of the planet, and notice that there's life down there, and there's there's volcanoes and mountains and stuff, and it's a just a regular planet. And I forgot to mention that Daystrom also built the computer that's in the Enterprise, in all the other ships. And he kind of basically says that M5 is like the computer on the ship is like a dinosaur compared to this. So Kirk talks about his recommendations for going down on the planet, and he says it would be Science Officer Spock, McCoy, himself, and a geologist that's on the ship that has more experience and has been around. And then M5 gives his recommendations, and it's Spock and the geologist, and I think there was maybe one other person, but it's a different geologist who's Kirk is like, he's an ensign and he doesn't have the experience. And they ask M5 why the recommendations, and turns out that this ensign had done geology, stuff in this area before, and on cargo freighters and stuff like that. So, indicating that he is familiar with this area where they're at. And then they ask why Kirk and McCoy were not recommended, and he's like, M5 just basically says they're not necessary for this mission. So he gives a completely different answer than what Kirk would do, and Kirk didn't know that information about that ensign. So anyway, they're informed by Uhura that two vessels are approaching, and they're given a priority message from that Commodore that there's a scheduled M5 drill. So the two vessels approach, and they lower. Kirk calls for phasers, but lowers them to like a lower setting to where it's gonna hit the ship, but it's not gonna do any real damage. Like 10% damage or whatever. So the phasers are fired. They get 2 hits on one ship, and then they fire on the other ship, and the attacking vessels break off and head back to where they came from. And Spock notes that the M5 computer acted a lot quicker than what a human would react. And Kirk, he admits that it was impressive, and they have a little conversation, and because at this point it's kind of indicated that sorry, I had to adjust the mic there. At this point it's indicated that Spock is like on board with this, but then they have a conversation where he says, he has no desire to serve under a machine, and that starships also run on loyalty and loyal to one man, and I'd rather serve that man than a machine. So then Kirk is kind of understands, okay, this is my friend, and you know, and I get what he's saying now, and that he finds the computer impressive, but it's not what Spock wants in Starfleet. So anyway, Commodore Wesley, calls him back, and you know, he says, compliments to M5. It was successful. The test was successful. The drill. And regards to Captain Dunsel. And then at that time, Kirk just walks off the bridge. Doesn't say shit. Just walks off the bridge. And Bones is like, who's Captain Dunsel? And he's like, Spock, explain what this is. And Spock comes to McCoy, and he said it's a phrase used by midshipmen at the academy, and basically it's regards to a part that serves no useful purpose. So, basically saying that the captain is serves no purpose. There's no point in having a captain there. So then you cuts to Kirk in his quarters, and Bones comes in, and he's got like a little tray with a cloth over it, and Kirk's like, I'm not in the mood for oh God, what did he say? Like, was it warm milk or some sort of something? I don't know. I don't remember what, or cook, or maybe a food or something. I don't remember what he said. And he pulls the cloth off, and it's 2 glasses of some sort of alcoholic drink. And he's it's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of Star Trek 2 when they're in Kirk's quarters at the academy, and he's remarking about getting old, and Bones gives him a pair of glasses, and they're kind of, same kind of sentiment, same kind of speech, and I thought it was really great. I really liked it. Kirk looks up and he says, all I ask is for a tall ship. And if you've ever watched Star Trek, you probably have heard this phrase before. And it's from a poem. I don't know what it's from. I have never actually looked it up. But I think it's from a poem. And a star to steer by, And Kirk starts talking about how the stars still remain. He's never felt so disconnected from the Enterprise. And he's just bummed out, because the Enterprise is like, his baby, He's like, he just feels disconnected from it now. And so at that time, another ship arrives, and it's not a drill this time. So it's an old style freighter that is automated. It doesn't have any crew. I don't know if they said it was carrying anything or something like that. I don't know. And M5, or the ship, M5 steers the ship closer to this vessel and starts charging up the photon torpedoes. Now, here's what's kind of a contradictory is that in the movies, the photon torpedoes have to be loaded manually. But I guess they could have like an automatic thing with like stacks of them that go down and then go into the chute. I guess that could be true. And so the M5 basically fires on the ship and destroys it, which is an indication that something's wrong, and they want Daystrom to like take it offline, and he's kind of hesitant to do it, and he's like, it was a mistake, and they're like, yeah, well, that could have been a ship with people in it and not automated, we gotta take it offline. And Daystrom's arguing back, and he's like, I just need to do some tweaks and changes, and he's like, well, you can do it after we take it offline, we're not gonna keep doing this. So they try to do it, and they go to the engine room, and there's like a force field there that Kirk runs into and kind of bumps him back, So then he tells Scotty, or Scotty's like, well, we can just cut it off at the source. So they go to do that, and it zaps one of the red shirts, one of the engineering guys, and it kills him. And then M5 basically connects like a beam straight into the engine room. So he's taking more power from the ship, and Daystrom's basically trying to rationalize this away, and to Bones, and basically saying we can try to fix it, and it's not this was a one-time thing. And Bones goes to talk to Kirk, and I don't know what room it is, because I don't think we ever see like Kirk's ready room. I don't think they have a ready room, but whatever room, it's like off to the side of engineering, so some sort of office, and they're having a back and forth about Daystrom and him being a genius, and when he was like 25, and how he created the computer that runs the ship, or the ship's computer. And Bones is like, what if after all these lectures and different things that he's gone to, he just gets bored, and what to him, he's smarter than all of us, and things like this, and basically thinks his M5 as his child, because he's like, even if your child murdered somebody, you still would come to their defense in some way, So Kirk is like, well, M5 is like his child, and Bones is like, well, yeah, he kind of thinks that way. So then Scotty and Spock are trying to get manual control of the ship, of like navigation and comms, because they don't have comms. They can't communicate to other ships, and there's Oh, and they Kirk uses that wall communicator. So in Strange New Worlds, in my review, I talked about that wall communicator where they push the button, there's a speaker, you can talk to somebody else in the ship with the wall communicator. They do it on Enterprise, but in Strange New Worlds, which is supposed to be prior to the original series, they just talk into the air, and whoever the intended receiver can just hear them. They don't have the wall communicator, and that it just irritates me that they can't get that little detail down. They get some details right and some details wrong. And Kirk on his chair can also press a button and talk to other people on the ship. Why, and when you're on TNG and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, they have the, the communicators that they wear on the shirt to talk to people, and it just irritates me. I don't remember the first season or two of Discovery before they go further into the future, but I seem to don't remember them having that wall communicator there either. But I have on my sheet of paper, it says wall communicator because I wanted to specifically point that out because it's just so irritating. So anyway, Spock and Scotty are trying to get manual control, and Daystrom comes in and he tries to stop them, and Kirk is like holding him back, and so they think that they get manual control back, but it turns out M5 like rerouted controls and sent them on a wild goose chase. And basically Scotty's like, well, when we looked at it, it said that we had control, but it was like a decoy, Bones says. And there's a lot of good interaction between all the characters get something to do, which is great. I mean, there's a lot of McCoy, Kirk, and Spock, but there's also Scotty's doing a lot. Sulu's doing a lot. Sulu's he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, and Chekhov and Uhura. So it's like everybody is kind of doing, their part, and it's not just one-sided, or it's not just it's not just Spock, Bones, and McCoy, or Scott, Kirk, Bones, and Spock. It's like all of them. And looks like there might be some people in the chat. Am I seeing things right? I'll check it out in a minute. It's this system that I'm using, it's kind of the way I set up the chat so that I can see the chat. It's kind of hard to see sometimes, but it does look like there might be some people. I'll talk to you guys in a minute. All right, so basically what they explain is that Daystrom had taken human ingrains and kind of fed it into M5. And so it's almost like it has human genes in its circuitry, like human thought in its circuitry. And I think they've talked about stuff like that before in like TNG and stuff like that. Uh, so it's because Spock keeps mentioning that it's acting illogical. And if it's a supercomputer, it wouldn't be illogical. It might would be wrong. If you ask Chat GPT a question about this episode or whatever, it might get most of the details right, but some details wrong. That's not logic or illogic. It's just not perfected yet, but it's still learning. So that's why they kind of ask about, ask Daystrom about like how did he program or get this computer to like learn, and he basically put human engrams throughout the circuitry. So then Uhura says that there's 4 more ships approaching, and this time it is a war game situation. But M5 doesn't know that it's a war game. M5 thinks it's the enemy, and they're attacking. And puts the phasers on full strength. And Kirk is like, we need to get control of the computer back. Daystrom, you need to do something about this. And Daystrom's still kind of waffling and still kind of, like, oh no, it'll be fine. And then the ship fires on these other 4 ships, killing people and killing. I don't think they destroy a ship, but they kill. People get killed. Like I think one of the captains gets killed and some other stuff. And that's where Bones is like, "There's your murder charge right there," or was it Kirk? One of the two. And he grabs a hold of Daystrom and he's telling him to do something about this. So Daystrom finally goes up to M5, starts talking to M5 and telling him that these people are not the enemy. You've murdered these people. To kill is wrong. And M5 is like protection. And he's like, well, no, you are allowed to protect yourself, but you murdered these people. You're allowed to. I don't want to get into this, but certain countries are allowed to defend themselves, but they're not supposed to be just straight up murdering people. If you know what I mean. And that's the argument that's been going on in certain regions of the world the past couple of years. There, I'm not gonna get into the whole who's right and who's wrong and blah blah blah. And then he starts talking to the M5 like he's talking about himself, like they're both the same people. And then because they find out that Daystrom had used his own engrams to put into the circuitry, and he's talking like, they used to make fun of you and talk behind your back when you go to lectures and all this stuff, and he's basically losing it at this point. And Spock pinches him on the neck, and they take him to sick bay. And then comes to find out that, Uhura finds out through the comms, what she's able to hear. They can't, so she's able to hear what they say, but they can't hear what they're saying. So Kirk can't tell them, hey, the machine is doing this. We're not trying to fire upon you, but we're locked out of the controls. We've been locked out of controls. And so then Kirk comes up and starts to talk about it. Talk to M5. Excuse me for a second. I gotta charge my computer. So then Kirk talks to M5 and convinces it, makes it realize that it killed people, that it didn't just fire for defense. And I call this like a logic break, which you'll see a lot in the original series where Kirk logic breaks a computer. Because M5 admits that it's not allowed to kill. It's to serve humans, And this is the... oh, God, what was the movie with Will Smith? Was it AI? But it's the 5 rules of robotics or something, to where you can't harm humans. And I don't know what the other 5, but it's Isaac. I think it's Isaac Asimov that came up with it. So yeah, he convinced. So and then he says, "What is the penalty for murder?" And M5 says death. And then M5 basically starts shutting itself down, and Spock basically says it's like committing suicide. And that's when Kirk is like, okay, Scotty and Spock, head to the engine room and dismantle this thing before it changes his mind. And then Daystrom, they show Daystrom in sick bay, and he's basically sedated. And they say he needs like therapy or something, because he's not a bad person. He's just he's an antagonist in the very sense of the word, like not a villain, an antagonist, which people get wrong a lot of times. And so he tells Scotty to shut down the power and lower the shields, because they're coming for him, the Commodore Wesley. And Wesley sees this, and it looks like the Enterprise is like basically a sitting duck, which could be a trap, but I'm gonna trust that it's not. And so he tells everybody to don't fire on the Enterprise. And then him and Spock and Bones are in the turbo lift, like having this, the end of the episode conversation. And it's like, how did you know Wesley wouldn't fire? And he's like, well, I know him, and I gambled on his intuition that, yes, it could be a trap, but he was more compassionate than that, you know. Which is what, Star Trek is all about, is compassion and blah blah blah, you know. So I gave this one 8.5 out of 10. And I'm going to take a quick look. If my computer would stop taking its time. And there are DJ Play Nice is here. I'm using OBS. I need to switch to StreamYard or something. I don't know. The movie was iRobot. Yes, thank you. God dang it. Yes, asthma. 3 laws. I thought there was 5 for some reason. Can't harm humans. Must obey human orders. Must protect its own existence. Aha. There we go. Compassion and blah blah blah. I couldn't think of what I was trying to. Compassion and trying to do, be heroic and do the right thing, and I couldn't think of the words that I was looking for, and I still can't. So I just blah 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 myself out of it. Yada yada yada. Yeah. So the 3 laws, okay, not 5. Well, what else did I want to say about this episode? It's great. It's a great episode. It's classic. Everybody that's watched TOS knows this one. It is, like I said, everybody's given something to do. It's not, you're not missing anyone. Chekhov probably has the least to do, but he's still there and he's still doing his part, and there's a lot of good discussions. And like I said, this is a discussion that we're having about AI today. Is AI is going to take over people's jobs, and people are going to have to find something else to do. Now, there's also discussion of, how there's always in the original series, there's a discussion of the balance between the human and the human intellect and intuition, and having like computers rule over everything. And my favorite episode of the original series, and probably one of my favorites of all of Star Trek, is A Taste of Armageddon. And A Taste of Armageddon, just very quickly, these two groups of people have been warring between each other just by letting the computer decide this is how many people should die this day, and they walk into like disintegration machines, and that's how they war. They don't actually go out on a battlefield and fight. They just let the computer decide, because they haven't been able to figure out a peaceful solution to this situation. And I'm not a big, I don't know that anybody's a fan of war, but there's people that will support, actions that the United States does, because they think it's being patriotic, or maybe they just think that this president is doing the right thing, and whatever, fighting terror, whatever you want to say. But I've heard people kind of, they kind of are okay with the fact that we're using drones now because it's not, you're not putting a pilot at risk. Uh, but then that makes it easier to accept, you know, war. And some people, defense contractors, you know, probably love that kind of sentiment because, you know, Congress hasn't declared war on anybody since World War II. And we and then since 9/11, Congress has relented their power and gave it more and more power to the president. And it's just dangerous thinking. And to have machines, you know, I mean, everybody looks at Terminator. True. Okay, what if they don't kill us? What if it just, it's like Wall-E, or what if it's just something like that, or something to just make it that much easier to be okay with going to war instead of trying to find other solutions, peaceful solutions, negotiations. That's what Star Trek is about too. And you know, and so these are conversations that were going on back then and they're going on now. And I think now it's a little too easy, in my opinion, to do these things. And people are too comfortable with it. And we know why, because, like I said, both sides, let's be honest, take money from defense contractors and lobbyists like that. And they also have military bases in their districts, so they don't talk about, you know, getting rid of these bases. You know, Ron Paul wanted to get rid of almost pretty much every overseas base. And then when they talk about, now I appreciate that there's things in the government that money gets spent in the wrong places, and we have to cut that money out. And I'm all for that. I'm all for cutting spending. But if they were serious about cutting spending, they would cut the budget of the Pentagon. And then you could cut it in half, and it still would be way, way more than other countries. And, you know, another thing is, you know, having Europe, you know, defend themselves. You know, that's how they can afford to have the free health care that they have, is because they don't have to spend as much. They're not spending as much money on defense as we are, and we are acting as their defense in a lot of cases. You know, when it comes to NATO and and, you know, I mean, when we look at Japan, we rebuilt Europe. We helped rebuild Japan. You know, we spent all that money, and that was fine back in the day when you weren't borrowing trillions upon trillions of dollars, and we were still on the gold standard. But it's not like that anymore, and we can't even, like, you know, I was talking to a coworker today who said, back in 2009, that was the last time that the minimum wage was raised. And I don't want to get too political. I'm just saying, back in 2009, you could get like a 5-layer burrito from Taco Bell for less than $1, and now it would cost $5. So um, to buy 5 of those, it's um, it's it takes more than an hour of my labor to buy 5 of those. Uh, and why is that? Because of inflation. Because we spend too much, and we spend most of the spending goes towards the defense budget and uh, going to war. The Iraq War and the Afghanistan War. Now, that does not say that we shouldn't have retaliated against Al Qaeda, but there is a better way to do that, in my opinion. But that's. But these are the kind of discussions that I wish we could have through storytelling in Star Trek, but we're not getting that. We're getting goofy shit, Muppets in season 4 of Strange New Worlds. Now, these first 3 episodes of Strange New Worlds have been good, in my opinion, but we're not getting that type of philosophical discussion anymore. It's all about, hi, I'm a trans person and you need to say my pronouns. That's not a discussion. That's you demanding things. That's not a discussion. That's not an allegory. It's just, you bringing modern day politics that would have been in 200 years from now or whatever would have been already settled and done and talked about, and you wouldn't be talking about that. You wouldn't be talking about that because you have, technology that could do, basically, you have magic at this point. So, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not going to say, I'll say when I think an episode is good. And I thought the first 3 episodes were good. The third one especially, because it was back to just a monster of the week type thing, which you don't have to not every episode has to have like this big philosophical discussion, but we're not getting it at all. We're just getting preachiness, and when I try to explain that to people that really love Discovery or really love Strange New Worlds, they always throw it back to, well, Star Trek was always woke and blah blah blah, and I was like, that's not what I mean. You don't understand what I mean. And it's like talking to a brick wall. Anyway, let's go back and see what. You're good, man. It was just funny. Yeah, yeah. Didn't know what to say. But let's go to the portion of the show where Fate chooses the next episode. And once again, DJ Play Nice, I did what I tend to do is late night when I'm scrolling on my phone, I mess up and I pick the wrong thing. So, or I accidentally press the button. Right now it's on TNG's Suspicions, but we're not gonna do that. We're gonna randomize it the way it's supposed to be randomized. Not me just messing around on my phone and accidentally pressing the button. I probably should just close this website out every time and just reopen it, so I don't keep doing that. Because I'm like on my phone, scrolling, and I'm like maybe watching somebody on YouTube, and I'm not paying attention to what I'm doing, that's what happens. So randomize me again, and we are Voyager season 6, 13 Virtuoso. That's a doctor centric episode. It's not bad, but I'm not gonna go through the whole plot of it right now. You'll just have to come back on Wednesday and find out what it's all about. But it's the doctor, and I don't know if anybody saw the Star Trek Academy trailer. I thought it was meh. But they have the doctors on there, and they're doing something with Cisco. I don't think they're going to be able to bring Cisco back. So they'll probably have some kind of stupid. They'll probably do something stupid with Cisco and ruin that. Plus, so he's still gone. He's still missing. So he never came back. Like he said, he was going to come back, and that's just. It's just fan service bait to get people to watch it. But you're not gonna get these shows aren't bringing a big chunk of the audience for Star Trek has dropped off. And I get that some people have probably died, but there's a whole Gen X out there. People like Nerdrotic and those other guys. They were big Star Trek fans too, and they refuse. I try to bring it up and say, "Hey guys, are you going to talk about Strange New Worlds?" They're like, "Nope, don't care," that type of shit. And so these shows aren't getting people back. You're getting Klingerons. You're getting people like me who are completionists, who we do it for the franchise, we do it just, but does that show look interesting? No, it doesn't. And I wouldn't blame people for not tuning in. I'm sorry. I wish that they would take a show like Strange New Worlds and throw in those allegorical things that I was talking about, but they don't. They do surface level shit, and that's about it. They did one episode that called Among the Lotus Eaters, which didn't really have philosophy, but it was sort of an allegory or a play on a play, basically. But anyway, Voyagers, yes, yep. Michelle Ferry's here. All right, good to see you, Michelle Ferry. Yep, the universe just wants me to do Voyager, and every once in a while, you get to do something different. But this website just wants me to do Voyager over and over. Not that I hate Voyager. The more I watch it, the more I like it. But I was hoping to get a little bit of a mix more often. Anyway, that's going to be it for me tonight. I will be back same time on Wednesday. And I'll let you know if anything changes. I'm still on a job hunt, which could change my days off and when I can do these shows. But I will try to keep them at the same time. But the day may change. But have a good evening, DJ Play Nice and Michelle Ferry, and anybody else that is out there lurking or watches this video in the future. Thank you for stopping by. Good night.